Hello, everyone, and welcome to APH's ExCEL Virtual Summer Camp. We're going to go ahead and give everyone a moment just to get settled in the room, get comfortable, find your best seat, or even better, get in a position that's going to help you engage today. As you're all setting up, I'd just like to remind everyone to set their chat to all panelists and attendees, or everyone, so that other campers can see what everyone is sharing with each other. My name is Jeff Schwartz, and I am the APH Outreach Specialist for the Southeast region. We are very happy to have you all with us today. This week, our camp theme is Crime Scene Investigation Camp for grades 8 through 12. This is our target audience. However, anyone is welcome to join in on the learning, and we're happy to have you here. I'd like to, at this time, get ready to turn things over. So I'd like to introduce, for the second day, our detectives, Detective Kathy and Detective Kaylee. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Jeff. This is Detective Kaylee, and I'm excited to be back with all of you for day 2 of Crime Scene Investigation Camp. I'll turn it over to Detective Kathy.
Hello, fellow investigators. I'm so excited to be here today. Yesterday, we reviewed the first 3 steps of the crime scene investigation process. I want to know who can remember what is step 1 when we first encounter a crime scene. You can let me know in the chat. Yes, we have some excellent investigators chiming in. So far, they are saying we need to secure the crime scene. And there was a great little hint that Detective Kaylee gave us. There are a whole bunch of WH words that are things that we can be looking for while we're securing that crime scene. That's that who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and then also there's a how in there as well. So we're going to be keeping those things in mind as we're securing that crime scene to make sure it does not become contaminated. And I already see Ali Pacadere has chimed in for step 2. Step 2, she says we need to separate those witnesses. I want to know, why should I keep my witnesses separated? And I also want to reach out to those of you who may be watching the recording and not with us live. Just take a moment in your mind to think, why do we need to separate our witnesses? And how does that help in my investigative process? And depending on where you're watching, if you're watching the recording, you can shout it out nice and loud. I see a comment of a mixed opinion. Isabel has also raised her hand. Isabel, if you would like to go ahead and unmute and tell me why I should separate my witnesses.
Same webinar. So step 3 is to scan the crime scene.
That is correct, but the question I was asking is, why should I keep my witnesses separated?
So other people wouldn't know about the crime scene?
That brings up an interesting thought. If I have my witnesses together, they can talk together. Sometimes they feed off of each other. Nice comment, Nicole. I like that. And it may contaminate. We've talked about contaminating our crime scene by if we have fingerprints or people are getting into it that aren't supposed to be there. But the same thing can happen with our witnesses. If I have witnesses together, then they might contaminate each other's testimony. Very good. And then I'm going to go ahead, since Isabel already told us, step 3 was scanning our crime scene. So I just want to know, let me know in the chat, give me a Y for yes, an N for no. Is this an in-depth scan of my crime scene? Am I going to want to be making sure every tiny little inch of that crime scene is searched? Or is this just an overall scan? What do you think, Detective Kaylee? Do we think we have a little bit of a misconception here?
I do think that we have a little bit of a misconception, Detective Kathy, and I think that the key word here is we're scanning. As we said yesterday, scanning is kind of like skimming a book or a piece of paper, right? When you skim or scan, you're just getting the big idea, the major parts of that, but you don't necessarily go into all of the details just yet. So, Detective Kathy, can you ask your question one more time?
All right, let's try it again. When I am scanning this crime scene, am I doing an in-depth search of that crime scene? Here we go. I see a few N's for a no popping into that chat. We've just arrived and we are only on step 3 of 7 of our investigative process. So there will be a whole lot of time coming on later for us to do a really thorough, in-depth search of the crime scene. So we can remember scan and skim both start with that same SK blend, and maybe that will help us to remember step 3 of the crime scene investigation process. Miley, you have a hand raised. What would you like to share? You can go ahead and unmute.
So I didn't know it started yesterday, but I was confused. I was really confused because my mom told me it started today, but I know I heard you guys say something about yesterday. I'm like, oh my God. So yeah.
Well, Miley, we are thrilled that you're here with us today, and you will have an access to see yesterday's recording so you can get all caught up. We've done a little bit of a review, but there will be materials available for you to catch completely up with us. And we are really glad you have joined us, Investigator Miley. So I want to talk a little bit now that we've reviewed the first 3 steps of the crime scene investigation process. I want to talk a little bit about our extension activities. Our extension activities are available through a website or an app called Flip. Welcome, Toddy. Flip is a great website or app that allows you to record little videos of yourself. And I know for sure that it is pretty VI friendly. So there was a link that was in the extension activity document that was emailed out yesterday, and that allows you to access our crime scene investigators group. And within our group, we have different topics. So the first topic we have is called the detectives meeting. And I'm going to just go ahead and share my screen real quick so you can see a little bit about what that looks like. I want to make sure that I'm sharing my sound. All right, Detective Kaylee, can you do a quick check for me? And can you see our crime scene investigators topic on Flip?
I can, Detective Kathy. Thanks for asking.
Perfect. So the very first topic that's listed is our detectives meeting. At the beginning of a shift for police officers, they have a meeting where they discuss kind of what's going on in some of the cases. So this is your chance to introduce yourself to us. I'm going to share Noah's video. I recorded a quick video, but I'm going to share Noah's real quick. I'm going to click on it. And then I get to click
Hi,
play.
my name is Tyler Brantogo, and I'm going to tell you a bit about myself. I have Usher syndrome type 1B and was diagnosed with it about a year ago. I'm a huge theater nerd, though, and we just finished Beauty and the Beast, a parody of Toy Story, and Footloose. Now we are going to do Clue, which is a murder investigation play for a Christmas show. I'm going to audition for Professor Plum. Now, why do I want to be a crime scene investigator? Well, I think that's fairly simple. I want to be studying crime scenes, analyze bodies, do a sweep on fingerprints and DNA, but most importantly, the yellow tape. It's a sign of honor.
I love it. That yellow tape is a sign of honor. And as you watch videos, there is an option for you to record a video comment. So you can comment on other people's videos and you can include your own. Within each topic, there will be a button that says add a response, I believe. So I would love for you guys to jump in our Flipgrid and let me know how things are going with your extension activities. All right, so now that we've talked about that, I'm going to jump in real quick and share our learning objectives for the day. Our first learning objective today is we want to be able to use specialized materials to sketch or create a tactile drawing of a crime scene. We also want to be able to describe different search patterns and identify appropriate situations to use those patterns. We are going to be touching on the ECC skills of assistive technology because we may need to use assistive technology to make our sketches. Sensory efficiency because we're going to need to use all of our senses to help us make those sketches and all of our senses to help us with those search patterns and orientation and mobility. Our materials that we are going to need is our 7 steps of crime scene investigation handout, some blank paper that we can use to take notes, some blank paper and a high contrast writing device or materials to make a tactile drawing such as yarn or wiki sticks, different textured objects, and it might be super helpful to have a black background so we can really maximize the contrast that we have. And the last thing we need is a way to participate in our checks for understanding. We can type it in the chat or we can unmute and speak. So I'm going to turn the time over to Detective Kaylee so she can talk to us about step 4 of the crime scene investigation process.
Thank you so much, Detective Kathy. So just like steps 1, 2, and 3 start with a word that starts with S, step 4 is keeping in that tradition with see and photograph the crime scene. So at this point, we've gotten a feel of the situation. We're starting to realize where components or pieces of evidence of the crime scene are, and we've made sure that the scene is safe and that any extra people or animals or living creatures that don't have to be there are no longer there. So now we're ready to see and photograph the scene. So during this step, a trained forensic photographer, and forensic is going to be one of our vocabulary focus words for today, and that simply means a person who is studying typically evidence that relates to human beings. So all kinds of biological, scientific parts of being a human. So that trained forensic photographer is going to take pictures of all of our marked evidence. Yesterday, we learned that when we secure the crime scene, we're marking evidence with number tags so that our pieces of evidence will have a tag with a number that directly relates to the actual piece of evidence in that record log so that everything matches nicely and neatly. After that forensic photographer takes photos of the marked evidence, they're also going to be making sure that we are capturing all of the small details of the scene. So scanning the crime scene is kind of that quick little big picture, if you will. But photographing specific pieces of the crime scene is when you zoom in really, really small if you need to, and take each of those small components in order to make sure that you've got a good holistic understanding. As we know, when we get the whole picture, we need the big pieces, and also those small and sometimes microscopic pieces. So I would love to read out about 4 answers if folks either want to raise their hands or drop their answers in the chat. And if you're joining us on YouTube or you're watching the recorded session, think about it in your head. Why would photographing parts of the crime scene, especially little tiny pieces of evidence, be an important step when we investigate? So why is it important to capture all of the really small details in a crime scene? I see that Isaiah has a hand raised. So Isaiah, if you want to unmute and tell us what you're thinking.
Sorry,
Why?
can you repeat that?
Yeah, why is it important for us to capture small, tiny little details of a crime scene?
Because the littlest of things can make the biggest differences.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Isaiah. You can go on and mute yourself again. The little things might make the biggest difference. Sometimes a fingerprint or a piece of hair or even a small little drop of liquid could help somebody solve a crime. Lilith in the chat said people might not remember properly. So if you go in, you scan your scene, you can secure your evidence, it might matter where exactly and how exactly that piece of evidence was found. And we can't always rely on our memories as super investigators to remember exactly where or how some item was found. Gabriel from the chat says that you don't want to miss the most important evidence, which is also true. Sometimes those smallest pieces are very, very important. And Ian dropped in the chat and said hearsay. So sometimes when you take photographs, that is actually capturing a moment in time. And when you do it well, or if you do it as a trained photographer during a crime scene, you are capturing that moment in time exactly as it looked and exactly how it was positioned. That way, if you go back and review the crime scene, there won't be any hearsay. You'll have a very specific picture of where exactly everything was located. Yeah, and Tyler expounded upon that, but asked, can't you just show the evidence if you didn't happen to photograph it so it's not hearsay? Good question. So when we talk about photographing the crime scene, we have talked about how we're actually going to keep our evidence, and we'll talk about that more in detail a little bit later, a couple steps from now today. But the evidence eventually has to be picked up. It has to be stored and it has to be sent somewhere for testing. The reason why we photograph it is so that we can know and remember where exactly we found it and how it was placed by either the perpetrator or somebody else involved in the crime. So thank you so much for all of your participation in that question. And what we've established is that it's important to photograph a crime scene so we know where evidence was left, how the evidence might be important, and we make sure that we're not missing any pieces of evidence. And remember, when we mark evidence, that means that we're assigning a number or a tag to that specific piece of evidence that matches where we log it in our investigator's record book. So that's step 4, seeing and photographing the crime scene. Detective Kathy, if you could throw our slide back up just briefly, please. I want to make sure that I
would love
didn't miss
to.
any information before I send it over to you for step 5. Detective Kathy is pulling up our PowerPoint. Excellent. So we do have 2 more questions. The first question, and I'd love for you all to drop your answers in the chat, is what devices work best for you individually to take photographs? And then also, what devices work best for you as an individual person to view photographs? So we know as investigators who have vision impairments, sometimes the way that we see, process, or able to interact with pictures can be different and unique for everybody. So what are some of the tools that you use for photographs? This is covering our ECC skills of sensory efficiency, assistive technology, and O&M. So some of our chat responses included an iPhone, which is a great tool because you can zoom in, you can change the contrast if you need to. Somebody said ones that don't consist of any photos, you don't need an evidence. Taking photos from a specific device and recording which device you're using. And somebody else just mentioned a camera. Other people use Braille descriptions of photos, so some of those alternative texts. Thank you so much, Detective Kathy. I don't need the screen anymore. And basically what we were trying to get as answer, somebody else said a camera, computers with Zoom in the feature to view photos. The short of it is that there are a lot of different pieces of technology that can help us and assist us in not only taking photos, but viewing those photos. With that, that summarizes step 4, seeing and photographing the crime scene. And I will pass it on to Detective Kathy.
That is great. Thank you, Detective Kaylee. So I'm going to keep up the trend because step 5, I have to count them in my head. Step 5 is sketching the crime scene. So here's my big question for you. We've just taken photographs of the crime scene. Why would we need to have a sketch of the crime scene as well? Isaiah, you have your hand raised. You can go ahead and unmute.
So that way you can remember how it looks, or that way you have an overall understanding of what happened and how it looks.
Thank you, Isaiah. That was an excellent answer. I really liked how Detective Kaylee was talking about during our crime scene investigation process, we're going to be looking at the whole scene, and then we're going to be breaking that down to little parts of the scene. But then we're going to have to look at the whole scene again. So if we sketch the crime scene, it helps us go back to that whole pictures again. Hey, and I love Tyler's comment. He thinks that we're going to need someone who can draw more than stick figures, but I disagree. I think stick figures would be great to have. And if you can draw stick figures, you can sketch your crime scene. Awesome.
Just add
So-
like clothes and stuff to the stick figures that match the descriptions of the people there.
You could add clothes to it, or that could be one of those things that instead of having, unless one of those pieces of clothing is a piece of evidence, that could be something that we could just refer to our photographs for. So let me get us caught up on our slide deck.
Miley had a hand up for a while too, Detective Kathy.
Oh, thank you so much, Detective Kaylee. Miley, you could go ahead and unmute.
So I am so I know we are doing the activities. I know I kept leaving. It's just because I'm trying to join on my computer, but for some reason it's not working, so I have to stay on my phone. But it's just the only thing is that I don't know how to point the camera.
Oh, and that's okay. You don't have to join with the camera. It might be best today to just go ahead and stay on your phone and just listen.
Okay, is it okay if I put my earphones in from my phone, my AirPods?
Definitely. If that helps you hear better, that would be great.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So step 5 is sketching the crime scene. And that helps our investigators to remember that big picture of the crime scene. And did you know that sketches of the crime scene can also be presented in court to make it easy for judges or juries to help get a feeling for what the crime scene looked like or the general layout of our crime scene. We can also use sketches of our crime scene when we're interviewing our witnesses, because if we show them a sketch of the crime scene, it might help them to remember certain details that maybe they have forgotten. So we want to look at some essential elements of our crime scene sketch. The first thing that our crime scene sketch needs to have is a heading. And a heading is kind of like the title of our crime scene sketch. This may be something as simple as sketch depicting primary evidence. It may include our case number to help us make sure that it references back to the correct case, but it helps us to organize our evidence and our investigative materials, so we keep them with the same crime. The next step is we need to diagram the area. So my recommendation is if it's a crime scene that's inside a building, we probably want to start with the perimeter of the building or of the room in which our crime occurred. So let me know in the chat, what is the perimeter? What does perimeter mean? That's a great vocabulary word.
I think perimeter means like it's like the length of something.
That is a great aspect of perimeter. Perimeter is the outside edges or the walls. So if, for example, our room is a rectangle shaped room, like a lot of rooms are, it would be those walls of the room that go all the way around the outer edges. Why would we want to start with the outside walls first? Why wouldn't I want to say, wait a minute, there's a bed in here, I'm going to start with the bed?
So perimeter is the edges of the.
Correct. Perimeter is the edges of our room. Lilith says the bed is not part of a wall. If I'm starting with a room and I need to place objects in it, it's going to be easier for me if I have that perimeter edge in my drawing first to help me put the items or sketch the items that are in that room. So we've started with the perimeter of the room. And an indoor area, I feel, is going to be easier to sketch than an outdoor area. There might be other complications that arise when we are doing that. Allie, I don't have plans for us to make a sketch today. You'll be making a sketch during your extension activities. That's an excellent question. So after I have, oh, go ahead, Detective Kaylee.
Hey, Detective Kathy, something that was rattling around when I was thinking like an investigator in my brain is that this step mirrors a lot of the other steps. I think that we start with the perimeter because that's more of that big picture, the whole scene, the overview or skimming of the scene. And then once we have the perimeter and the outside edges, we start putting in pieces like the bed, which is some of that smaller, more detailed parts.
Perfect. Thank you, Detective Kaylee. You put into words what my brain was having a hard time putting together. I appreciate that. So we have our perimeter. We can do this. We have to think about the medium that we're using when we're sketching. We can either draw a line, or if we're using tactile representations, we need something that's most likely straight. Our sketch does not have to be exactly to scale. I want to know, does anybody know what it means when I make a drawing to scale? Oh, maybe that's a stumper question. Zachary Smith raised his hand. Go ahead and unmute, Zachary. I'm not hearing Zachary right now, but I'm seeing some great answers coming through the chat. Tatiana says, if it is to scale, it is proportionate. And Nicole says, it's like a replica size, but not an exact size. Zachary, how are you doing? Were you able to unmute?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
You're talking about scale, right?
Yes.
So portion something.
Proportion is exactly right. Very, very good. So it's perfectly replicating the actual scene, just like on a map. So on a map, we will see a scale on the map that says 1 inch equals 10 miles. And so we know for every inch on the map, in real life, that is actually 10 miles or whatever it is that the scale says. For our first sketch of our crime scene, it doesn't have to be to scale. We can just do a rough representation of it just to get the general idea down. However, there are some little details that we do want to put in, such as we want to like jot down the measurements. This wall is 10 feet long. This other wall is 14 feet long. Even though it's not drawn in scale on my drawing, that gives me the measurements that I need to be able to create it to scale later on. So once we have the perimeter done and we know we're not drawing this to scale, then we can start to add in the major parts of the room. And some of the things I really like to put in first would be things that aren't going to move or things that will not change. For example, in the room that I'm in right now, there's a window above my head and behind me. That window is not going to change, that location. I can't take that window out and move it. So it's almost like a landmark in the bedroom. What are some other things in a room? Perfect. Gabriel, you read my mind. So Gabriel says a door is also another one of those things in a room that is going to be stationary and permanent, and I cannot move. And a window. Perfect. Those are important landmarks. Stairs. Excellent job, you guys. Closet location. You have got it. Yes, and Tyler, I love how you brought that up. Tyler says, I would say the bed, but my brother moves his all the time. Items like a bed would be the next thing that I would add to my sketch, because items like beds are large. And so I need to get those large pieces in the room. Keeping in mind, I'm also jotting down the dimensions of those objects. And I'm taking note of what is the distance between some of these objects. For example, right now, I'm sitting at a desk in the room that I'm in, but my desk is also in a spare bedroom that I have. So I would want to take note that it's probably, and I would have to get a tape measure out and measure, but it's probably about 18 inches from my bed to my desks. Oh, and what if the criminal rearranges the entire room? That could be very interesting, and the criminal's had a lot of time on his hands. So after we've put in the perimeter, those fixed items, and some of the larger items, then we're going to want to put the smaller items and then make sure that we put in our evidence and put it in where it is in the room. We can have a special little symbol that we use, or we could just use numbers 1, 2, 3 because we're numbering our evidence. Excellent. So after we've added our evidence, then we need to create a legend. So if we've used some symbols on our drawing, we need to make sure that anyone who looks at this sketch can understand it, because we are making this sketch with the possibility that a judge may be looking at this, jury members may be looking at this, lawyers could be looking at it. So we don't want them to be confused. So we need to make sure that if we used a star to represent our evidence, that they say, put a star equals evidence in our legend. See, so we have made sure that we have a heading on our sketch. We have our sketch itself. We have the legend. And then if we happened to sketch it to scale, we need to write on there what the scale was. But if we did not sketch it to scale, we need to write down not to scale on our sketch so that people don't automatically assume. Perfect. And then one other thing that we can add is a cardinal direction. If I'm looking at a map, which way is north on a map most of the time?
Up of compass.
On a compass. That's right. Our cardinal directions are on a compass. And Toddy tells us that usually on a map, north is the top. And we can add that in our sketch with the letter N and an arrow pointing up.
Isn't north like right or left?
North is usually at the top of our cardinal directions. South is at the bottom. On the left is west, and on the right is east. That's how normally cardinal directions are set up. Exactly. Justin says just like a map. Perfect.
I have a question. When are we doing the drawing? Like when are we doing that? When are we starting like the activities?
You'll be doing your extension activities after this learning session is finished.
Okay. And what app do you need me to do?
You need the Flip app. So for the extension activities, make sure that you will receive an email after our session is finished that will have all of the instructions that you will need for the extension activities.
So you'll send it to my parents, right?
Yes, it will be sent to your parents.
Okay.
All right, so I just want to take a quick little survey with you guys and see how many of you guys will be sketching this, making your sketch with like a paper and a high contrast writing device, and how many of you will be making a tactile representation.
So Detective Kathy, do we want to have them either put D for drawing, traditional paper, or T for tactile for any other method in the chat?
That is excellent. And while they're throwing that in the chat, I'm just going to put up on the screen.
So P for paper or T for tactile. We love it.
I love it. And so here's just a quick little representation on the screen. On the left is a rough drawing of a crime scene with the perimeter and some major objects in it. It has a detail written at the bottom. And then on the right is the legend. So when it says an M on the drawing, in the legend, it says that's a file cabinet. Perfect. All right, I am going to throw it back to Detective Kaylee, and she can let us know about step 6 of the investigative process.
Thank you so much, Detective Kathy. We did have a question in the chat, and I am inclined to answer one way, but I do want to make sure it is not an incorrect answer. Somebody asked if they would be able to do their sketch digitally. I believe that that would be acceptable as long as there is a way for you to, if you desire, share your sketch with the group or upload it in some manner. Is that correct, Detective Kathy?
Exactly. She has jumped into another option that investigators use to create their sketches. And then the flip for the sketch has not been uploaded yet, but I will be able to upload that topic as soon as we're finished with our session today.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Detective Kathy, for explaining step 5, sketching the crime scene. Now, even though we went into some more detailed components of step 5 with our sketch, we're starting to mark evidence, we're starting to find some of those smaller details within our bigger picture. Step 6 is where we start to get really incredibly detailed with our crime scene search. So step 6, keeping with our S tradition of our steps, is searching the crime scene. Searching the crime scene for step 6 is a detailed and thorough search. Before I begin to explain step 6, I noticed that Miley put her hand up. Miley, what's up? You can unmute if you have a question or a comment. What's up?
So the app, is it called Flipgrid or just Flip?
That's a great question. It's now just called Flip because it's easier, it's quippier, it sounds a little bit better, I guess. Somebody
I've heard
who
of an
makes,
app called Flipgrid.
yeah, so it used to be Flipgrid. So somebody who is in a different position than I am decided to change it from Flipgrid to Flip. But you'll get the specific join link to the email that was used to sign you up for this, as well as give you the Zoom links. Thank you so much, Miley. Good question. So step 6 is a detailed and thorough search of the crime scene. Oftentimes, investigators will use what is called a search pattern. A search pattern is a way to organize all of the people who may be investigating the scene and who are there to help out to find even smaller pieces of evidence. What they want to do is make sure that no part of the scene is unsearched. As Detective Kathy said earlier, sometimes it's easier to search scenes that are smaller. If it's just a single room in a, one-bedroom apartment, for example. But sometimes, especially if you're looking for a lost child in a campground, for example, there might be a very, very large, wide area that needs searching. And that's where search patterns come in. There are several different search patterns that investigators use. And some of you who receive orientation and mobility or occupational therapy may be familiar with some of these search patterns as well. We oftentimes use them to find objects within our very immediate surroundings, and people can use them to find objects in larger areas. So the first is our grid pattern. The grid pattern is one of those parallel searches where you reach the end of an area, turn 90 degrees, and begin again in a straight line to the next component of the search area. This is done with 2 opposing patterns, which means that some people will be going left and right, some people will be going up and down, or horizontally and vertically, in order to make sure that each grid or part of the scene is thoroughly searched. There may be a top to bottom pattern that's employed. This is better for smaller spaces. And it's kind of like the grid pattern, but there aren't 2 opposing directions that search teams may be going in. Top to bottom simply means you start at the far top corner and then you go vertically down. You make a small 90-degree turn and then you go vertically up from the bottom to the top, make a turn and continue that pattern, which is very similar to the left and right search pattern. Whereas instead of going vertically, you're moving horizontally. Detective Kathy, did you have any input there before I keep moving? I just want to make sure I'm super accurate describing patterns.
I think of a grid, when I think of a grid pattern, I think of the game Battleship, or I think of coordinates, like coordinate squares.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Or
wonder how
check.
many of our investigators have done that in their math classes. If we give you the coordinate 2, 1, we know we go over 2 and then up 1, and it reveals a very specific spot.
Excellent. Oh yeah, we've got several folks who are either in math classes that involve graphing or who draw a lot of maps and use maps. We also have our fan and spiral search patterns, which essentially involve moving in a more circular or round motion, typically from a center point and then moving outwards in a spiral. The diagonal search pattern is new to me, Detective Kathy. Do you have any input there?
I would think the diagonal search pattern would be like fairly similar to like the top and bottom or the left and right, but it's just rotated slightly.
Moving from corner to corner.
Mhm.
That makes sense. Thank you so much. So yeah, we've got several different types of search patterns that investigators might use to make sure that they are accurately scanning a crime scene and thoroughly searching that crime scene. The reason why we have to use predetermined patterns is so that everybody understands what their specific search role and location should be, so that we don't accidentally miss any evidence. Again, that orientation and mobility piece of directional concepts is coming back because we often have to describe evidence in relation to location. So forward or backwards, left, right, up, down, above, below, in front of, behind, all of those words that we talked about yesterday are relevant again as we continue to try and find evidence. If we find any new evidence, that will be marked with a numbered tag, and then it will be logged in our record book. When we find new evidence, if we find new evidence during this thorough search, we also have to include it on our sketch of the crime scene that we've already made. So I've gotten a lot of opinions dropped in the chat about graphing. I love it when I see people say they like graphing, and I feel very, very sad when I see people say they hate graphing, but that's okay because we all have different likes and dislikes. I do have a question for you though, specifically regarding this detailed and thorough search of the crime scene. In your life, so putting on your investigator hat, thinking about your existence as a human, when do you ever use search patterns, if ever? And which search patterns work best for you? What tips or tricks might you have for some other folks? So you can drop those answers in the chat. I'll give everybody a couple of seconds to type their answers. But when do you use search patterns in your personal life? And which ones work best for you? We have somebody who mentioned that when crossing a new street or navigating a new store, Allison from the chat will often use search patterns. Tatiana said that finding the cane using a grid pattern, excellent, excellent. So that's two very different situations where people use search patterns. The first is orienting themselves to a space and navigating within that space. And then the second is finding an object within a space. Those are two great applications of search patterns. Justin mentioned trying to find details using bottom to top, right? And finding those more nuanced elements of our environment. Thank you, Justin. Miley, what you got? Do you use search patterns and which ones work best for you?
What do you guys mean by search patterns?
So sometimes if somebody has blindness or lower vision and they drop an item, for example, or they need to explore a new space, they may have been taught patterns to use in order to find their item or navigate a new space safely and efficiently. Do you ever have to feel around on the floor if you drop something, or do you use a search pattern even visually in your life?
Yeah, sometimes. Or like for an example, yesterday I dropped my do I sound good? So because
yeah, you sound great. So yesterday you dropped.
I dropped to my what did I drop? I dropped one of these my earphones, which is my AirPods. And these are like brand new. So I'm like, where did it go? So I had to search around for it to like find it because just, like these things are wireless. So it could be, yeah, it can. So sometimes.
Excellent. Great answer, Miley. And Miley brought up a good point. Sometimes the things that we have to search for can be really teeny tiny, like AirPods. Or they could be bigger, like a whole person who's gone missing. Gabriel mentioned a different search pattern to use. Anytime he loses something, moving your arms or your cane in large circles to find that missing item. So that's a great example of not even just using your hands to search, but using another tool such as a white cane to assist you with searching. All right, I'm going to check out the chat right quick before I start to pass it off. Working from the edges to your way in, always needing to find the phone, me too. And one other person from the chat mentioned using feet to find stuff on the floor so that you don't have to crawl on your hands and knees. Absolutely. Or pinging, right? So sometimes we don't need search patterns because we have assistive technology. All right. If I did not call on you or if I did not read your answer aloud, please know that it's not personal. We are just coming to the end of our session, and I will make sure that I call on you for additional answers throughout the next couple of days. But just to summarize, we have lots of options for thoroughly scanning a crime scene and thoroughly searching a crime scene. That was my mistake. Detective Kaylee just misspoke. In a very detailed manner. Searching the crime scene is different from scanning the crime scene because the search of the crime scene is where we start to try and tie up our loose ends, one might say, where we get all of the pieces of information and make sure that all of them are found and recorded. The ways that we do that include using search patterns and then also sensory efficiency, using a bunch of different senses in order to make sure we are looking at the crime scene as a whole. With that summary of step 6, searching the crime scene, I will pass it over to Detective Kathy.
I just want to bring up a comment from the chat that I really liked. Allie says, if I really can't find something, I use Be My Eyes. And I think that brings up another really important part of searching the crime scene. There is always more than one person at the crime scene searching because, again, as we spoke yesterday, we all have different perspectives and we're all looking at a situation just a little bit differently. So by having more than one person looking, we can help make sure that we catch every tiny little thing that we can, because as mentioned at the beginning of our lesson today, sometimes it's the tiniest piece of evidence, like a hair, that can crack the case and help us find exactly what happened and who did it. I love that. Isabel, I noticed that you have your hand raised. I'm going to take your, you can go ahead and unmute, and then I'm going to go ahead and summarize our session for today.
So one thing that I use to ping my phone, if I put it somewhere in my house, I'll use my Apple Watch, or if my parents or someone lost their phone, there's an app for Apple called Find My, and you can use that app to find anything.
Exactly, Isabel. Thank you so much for that observation and that suggestion. We really appreciate it.
Alt Y, and now lowered.
All right, so just to summarize, we have talked about steps 4 through 6 of the crime scene investigation process today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. We know that there are 7 total steps in the crime scene investigation process. And today we talked about seeing and photographing the crime scene. And we discussed different ways that we can take photographs and different ways that we can view photographs, and why it's important to take a photograph of different evidence at the crime scene. Sometimes we have to, well, not sometimes, all the time, we have to take the evidence from the crime scene and we have to package it and then move it from the crime scene. So it's very helpful to have a photograph of where it actually was located in the crime scene to help in our investigation process. The next step we talked about was sketching the crime scene. And I am confident that all of our investigators here have the ability to sketch a crime scene. Remember, it doesn't have to be a perfect sketch. This is just a rough overall view. So we're zooming out again from those small details so we can get a big picture view of our crime scene and where all of the pieces fit. Then step number 6, we are going to be searching the crime scene. We want to make sure that we are doing a very systematic and organized search. We don't want to just go in the room and kind of ping around the room like we're bouncing off the walls when we're investigating this crime scene. We want to make sure that we have a very thorough pattern, and everyone who's involved in investigating is using that same pattern to search. So we're not running into each other, but we're also making sure that every inch of that crime scene is covered. We talked about the vocabulary words and the areas of the ECC that we discussed today were orientation and mobility, career education, sensory efficiency, search patterns, forensic, and then I'm also going to throw in there assistive technology, because there are many types of assistive technology that can be helpful to us as we're searching the crime scene. And remember, it doesn't always have to be high tech to be assistive technology. Making a tactile sketch of our crime scene is assistive technology right there to help us so we can have access to it. So we have just a couple minutes. Does anyone have any questions, any comments, or any concerns? You can go ahead and raise your hand if you do, or you can throw it in the chat. Oh, and before I get to any of those hands, Detective Kaylee, I just want to make sure I share after today's session, the extension activity will be sent in an email. It will be the email that was used to register you for this class, and it will have the links to flip. Lilith, the crime scene that you're meant to draw is from our extension activity from yesterday. Remember, we talked about how we have a hypothetical event where you've been hanging out with friends. When you come home, you find that your bedroom has been ransacked and your favorite gaming device has been stolen. Your bedroom is now a crime scene, and that's the crime scene we are going to be using in all of our extension activities. All right, we have a couple more minutes. Isabel, your hand is up. Do you have a question or a comment?
Audio now unmuted.
So who decided to change Flipgrid to just Flip?
It would be the people who own Flipgrid. I don't know exactly who that was. All right, and I believe I'm trying to find, I can't see who else has their hand raised. Was it Zachary?
Miley has her hand up.
Oh, Miley. Miley, you can go ahead and unmute and share with us. And that's okay if you don't have any.
I'm unmuted. Sorry, it kind
Go
of took me
ahead.
a long time. A question. So, one concern is the stuff that you guys sent, like the materials. Like, do we have to send it back?
You can participate through Flipgrid, and if you choose not to participate through Flipgrid, that's okay too.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know if the APH stuff that you guys sent, do we have to send it back?
Oh, those materials, no. The APH materials with the skeleton, is that what you're referring to? No, those
Yeah.
I believe are yours to keep.
Oh, okay. So are we gonna be doing the skeleton like during the live hour?
We will. Spoiler alert, that's coming on, I believe that's coming on Thursday.
Oh, okay. So like, and then Friday's our last day, right?
Correct.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, and another question, are we allowed to have observers?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. We're anyone on the link, or if you have someone at home, you're welcome to share out. So, well, that puts us at the top of the hour. So I would love to thank Detective Kathy and Detective Kaylee for a wonderful lesson today. We're through our second day of our camp. I'm gonna pause the recording really quick.